The members of the committee. Want to, first really thank you for giving us opportunity today. Share the thoughts on as you think about your priorities as Congress. Chairman Tonko, your subcommittee, I would submit to you, is the most important subcommittee in Congress right now. The work that we do in this Congress is going to be pivotal to determining whether or not we survive as a species. I do not say that lightly. The climate crisis is existential. I greatly appreciate your leadership, Chairman Pallone's leadership in addressing this crisis head-on. I've been encouraged by your work to hold this administration and the EPA accountable for upholding existing climate policies, including CAFE standards. I thank Chairman Tonko for his work developing your climate principles this past week, which is an integral first step towards finding consensus within our own caucus and across the chamber. And I believe the document lays out many important ideas currently missing from our conversations regarding climate policy. If we are going to address the climate crisis, we have to acknowledge a couple facts that may be politically difficult, but that doesn't mean we can duck them. The first is that the climate crisis is urgent. We do not have time to debate settled science any more than we have time to debate gravity. It is real, it is now. Every day that we fail to act, the consequences of our inaction become more costly and more dire. History is going to judge us not by how we message to our political base, but to how we rose to this challenge. However, that does not mean that the necessary changes in our energy and environmental policy are going to be simple. Our standard of living, our economy, our social safety nets, and our government itself depends on energy access. It is the height of naivete to assume that the changes we have to make are going to have simple little fixes. We can't allow ourselves to be deluded into thinking that just because the problem is urgent, any solution will suffice. If we ignore the urgency, it's suicide. If we ignore the complexity, it's irresponsible. So we have to account for both. We can't just issue edicts from on high, but we also can't shy away from expertise. We cannot act with the purpose of scoring easy political points. That may feel good, but we do so at our own peril. The urgency of the crisis demands we act with serious determination and in a measured and deliberative manner that is not inconsistent with urgency. So if I can only persuade you to do one thing today, please unleash the nerds. Those nerd-driven solutions may not be exciting, they may not be sexy, they may not have a great little soundbite around them. They may not make primetime news headlines, and many of those solutions are in fact already known. A lot of them are low-hanging fruit we could enact tomorrow. That's a good thing. It's a great opportunity. Some of the solutions would build on policies that are already working. CAFE standards have helped increase the average fuel economy of our light-duty vehicle fleet. I hope this committee could encourage policies like a fee-based program that would build on that success by rewarding consumers who buy more efficient, cleaner vehicles. The committee should also consider complementary policies to help get less efficient vehicles off the road. Many, many years ago, I did some work for California. We found that the single most cost-effective they could do would just pay everybody with an old Dodge Dart $10,000. We can get those clunkers off the road and make a big difference. Other climate policies have broad bipartisan support. I think members of both parties have agreed that we should prioritize the deployment and development of grid-scale energy storage technologies. Those technologies will not only lower energy costs for consumers, but make our grid more resilient and efficient while lowering greenhouse gas emissions. That's why I was proud to sponsor H.R. 2909, the bipartisan and bicameral Promoting Grid Storage Act, alongside many members of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I'd urge this committee to take up and pass the measure. There are other solutions that require that we look back at existing laws with renewed scrutiny for how they worked in practice. The Federal Power Act, for instance, makes it clear that FERC should ensure that electricity rates are just and reasonable, and yet rates across the country fail to account for the cost of carbon pollution. FERC has been hesitant to address that massive externality because some there believe they don't have the authority. I disagree. I don't think it's what Congress intended. I think the deregulation of energy markets did not mean that we still don't have social obligations to set prices that account for externalities, and we need to say so, and we need to say so loudly. Now, to be clear, economy-wide measures need to be taken to address the full scope of the issue, and these policies should be technology neutral. They need to put the goal of reducing CO2 above the path of how we get there, and they need to embrace climate action as a once-in-a-generation investment opportunity. I've spent 20 years in the clean energy space. I've built over 80 projects in 30 different states. Every single project that I built lowered CO2 emissions and saved money. With one exception, none of my clients ever did those projects because they were as passionate about climate change as I was. They were greedy. In Washington, to invest, I've invested about $300 million. If we view that from a lens of Washington, that is a cost we have to score and figure out how to pay for. Outside of Washington, that's an investment opportunity. Let's embrace it as that investment opportunity. Let's use this to grow the economy. And to be sure, not all these solutions are within the jurisdiction of your subcommittee or even the broader committee, but each illustrates the kind of tasks we need to be willing to take on if we are going to address the climate crisis. The task is urgent, the task is complicated, and I hope the committee will consider some of the proposals I've mentioned here today, along with about 3,000 others that I'm working on. And I look forward to working with any and all of you in any way I can to help combat the crisis. Thank you again for having me today, and thank you so much for your leadership.